Babysitters of Reddit. What screams well? This kid is fricked when they grow up. I was a casual babysitter, but when I lived in LA I babysat for a family that lived in a giant house on a hill and they refused to say no to their kid, and I wasn't allowed to either. She wanted to do something dangerous and I wouldn't let her, and she told me her parents let her do it. I said, well, I'm responsible for your safety right now, so I can't let you do that. When her parents got home they scolded me for saying no. That was the last time I babysat for them. Knew a kid whose parents thought it was funny to tell him the wrong names for things. Socks were called turtles. Put your turtles on. Crap like this. Wondered why he had screaming meltdowns in daycare, then kindergarten etc. until he was finally able to read by himself. In grade 4. Because spelling turtle SOCK doesn't give you any head starts. JFC, his parents just delayed his education and development drastically. All for shoots and giggles. WTF. A 12-year-old with no physical or developmental disability still needing his mother to take him into the family restroom. My nephew. I used to work at a daycare and this one kid kept trying to stick his finger in the electrical sockets. The sockets were taped off so he couldn't, and would fall from pretty high places and hit his head. I have no clue how he's still alive, but I now believe he is immortal. You babysat Keith Richards. Smooth time. I babysat a 6-year-old and his parents has a few strange rules, but smooth time was by far the worst. My first day while walking through the routine, I was told every evening after bath time, I was to cover this kid head to toe in petroleum jelly to prevent cracks in his skin, aka dry skin. It happened every morning as well, but the mom or dad did it then. I really don't think it was anything malicious. The other rules were similarly overly cautious, like the kid had to wear shoes at all times to prevent him hurting his feet, but that kid is gonna have a hard time at his first sleepover. I'm not a babysitter, but a relative of mine was for a short period of time. She said this 4 or 5-year-old kid would tell her about how he wanted to cut into his pets to see how they work. The creepy behavior continued. She brought it up to the mother who didn't seem to care. One day she arrived, and the kid brought her a handful of various teeth that weren't human, still bloody. That was the last time she babysat. Jeffrey Dahmer too. Kind of a different, this kid will be fricked up and more this kid is will be in butthole. I babysat for a family for years with 2 sons, 2 years apart. The younger boy was always sweet, loved animals, active, and much more social. He had a lot of issues with school, but in general, a likable kid. The older boy, selfish, callous, constantly complained, and made it clear he didn't care about anyone's feelings. He would bully his younger brother and purposely hurt him past normal sibling rivalry or conflict. I've never seen him show anyone any real affection, and I've known this kid from age 17, and for years this was every day. And again, he has had special contempt for his younger brother. He only ever had one true friend who he ended up alienating around age 10 because he was such a jerk. I doubt he's got any other close friends now, and I doubt he'd be able to get a girlfriend with how selfish and obnoxious he is. His parents are great people, and his brother is a great kid. The parents struggle to see his true colors, but his brother sure knows. I think they'll be truly shocked when they see their sons basically want nothing to do with each other when they're adults. Grew up with a kid just like this. My mom told me years later that the biggest lie she has ever told was when she told the kid's mom that she was sure he'd grow out of it one day. My erstwhile best friend married a woman he shouldn't have. She was always treated as second class growing up, while her brother was a golden child who could do no wrong. The brother grew up to be a crack addict, and my friend's wife wanted to adopt their 2 crack babies since she couldn't seem to get pregnant herself. The younger one was a little slow but an okay kid. The older one was off from infancy, and nothing but trouble growing up. The kind of kid with zero empathy, regard for others, or care for rules, norms, or values of any kind whatsoever. My friend was a pushover to his wife's weird oppositional defiant personality. All decisions raising the boy were basically the opposite of whatever the husband thought was best. Her adopted son was now the golden child, and he was relegated to the inferior sibling role. Every time I talked to him, it was long stories about the trouble Jay had gotten into, and the futile efforts that had been made to correct or improve the behavior, and conflicts with his wife over literally every aspect of raising him. Eventually, they got pregnant and had a daughter of their own. My blood ran cold. Last time I ever heard from him, he mentioned Jay would no longer be living with them because something really bad happened. He was around 13 by then. I'm very hooked on this. I need to know what Jay did. Had a kid who doused his mother's bed with her and her current pump in it with lighter fluid and was sitting in the floor trying to light matches. He was just shy of 5. This kid committed arson. Yeah, he may have came from the wrong place. I've worked in several kindergartens. For me, most of the kids I thought that about, well, it wasn't their fault. They had just been dealt a really bad hand in life, and I knew it would take so much work for them to get ahead. One kid, he was 5. His mother was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and this kid lived with a foster family who did the best they could do. This mother had basically babied him, resulting in this poor 5-year-old having no social skills at all. He would get into conflicts with other kids because he didn't understand their games and would interrupt them, and they would, as a result, tell him to go away. He would then be sad and took his sadness out on the kids by hitting them. He also had very bad verbal skills. When I first met him, I barely understood what he was saying. His tantrums reminded me of a much younger child. He also loved his mother. Since she had raised him by herself, she was his whole world. The most heartbreaking situation was one day when his mother came to visit him. This was after he had been moved to his foster family, and the mother was only allowed to see him with supervision. We had an agreement that she could come visit him in kindergarten for a few hours every week. So she showed up, and he ran into her arms. 2 hours later, we had to physically pry him off her. He wanted to go home with his mom, and he could not let go of that. He didn't stop screaming until 2 hours later when he tired himself out and fell asleep. I thought to myself that day, this kid is not growing up to be a functioning adult. It broke my heart. He was a really sweet kid. Funny, curious, inquisitive. I still send him a thought once in a while. I hope he's doing okay. My son is 5 and he and I are also close. Cause, you know, he's 5. I have bipolar disorder and I can't imagine how it would break my heart to lose him and vice versa. He's the reason I take my mental health so seriously. My kids don't deserve a crazy mom or a childhood defined by my issues. Not a babysitter, but had a classmate that had parents that knowingly taught him the wrong things to avoid him getting confused and eventually pulled him out of school after only a few years of him being in our school. They said, for example, that negative numbers don't actually exist. Decimal points are just full stops for big numbers and so on and so forth. Parents also gave him way too much free rein. I live in an area of London that isn't the best for crime. That is, you shouldn't really be letting children go to school by themselves until at least age 14-15, and if so, at least with a few friends. By age 8 his parents allowed him to go to school by himself. He lived about 15 minutes away. He was also extremely clumsy and could be very rude. TLDR. Had a classmate whose parents were too lazy to teach him the right things, told him his education was full of lies and eventually homeschooled him. They let him go to school by himself aged 8 and he was clumsy and kinda rude. I was a preschool teacher for 2 years. I worked with some children who were not meeting developmental milestones, such as speech delays, extreme lack of social skills, or feeding themselves. The parents didn't know and or care about the missed milestones because they didn't care enough about their child. The teachers would tell the parents about their child not meeting developmental milestones. The parents refused to change anything in the home environment. My mom ran a 2-year-old room a few times over the years, and she talked about how every kid in her class was potty trained at daycare fast and at home used diapers. Babysat a kid. That kid is 8. All she does all day is watch YouTube videos. Her parents don't care that YouTube is just taking her down wormholes, so she now believes that the world is flat and she's obsessed with watching people open these weird dolls that have a gazillion plastic parts. Her parents buy them for her and she opens them and discards them. She is 8 and still has temper tantrums cause her parents reward them, and her parents, who don't really like each other much, neither of them provide any discipline whatsoever. Babysat once. Once was enough. Cause I said no to her and she hit me. Cause her parents have never said no and she has never had consequences for her behavior. Kid don't have any real friends. Cause her parents gave her no instructions in how to be a real human being. It's a shame. crappy parent that doesn't care. I once babysat a little boy. From the time he was 1-3, his mom was busy going on vacation and partying. I remember as he grew he had less and less clothes because he outgrown the ones he had. I remember he only had one pair of socks because his mom would lose every freaking sock. I felt ashamed delivering him to the daycare with 2 different socks all the time. It may not seem like a big deal, but look at it from a different POV. If you can't take care of a pair of socks, how are you gonna take care of a baby? Matching socks is overrated, but I understand your point. Had a friend's 5-year-old little boy kill his kitten while I was making lunch because he didn't want to play with it anymore. Called the friend right away and told her and said I was gonna bury it in the backyard and that when she got home we needed to sit down and explain why what he did was wrong. That evening we did just that, but he failed to see how killing a living thing was different from throwing away a puzzle or book he didn't want anymore. Needless to say, I told her I could not continue watching him and that he needs some help. She understood and did try therapy, although she said that did not go well and he wasn't allowed back. I moved out of that state a year later and she moved back to her home state, but I always wonder how he turned out or if he will be the next Ted Bundy or whatnot, as he will just be about 22 now. Worked in a daycare. Kid has no chance honestly. Mom is a raging alcoholic and mentally ill. They have transient housing, occasional homelessness, and this kid is angry. He stomped a baby bird on the playground, enjoyed kicking the teacher and strangled 2 puppies by carrying them around by their necks. He kicked the teacher hard enough to leave bruises and laughed. This was a prick. He was 5. He moved away and is now around 8. I won't be surprised at all to see his name in newspapers in a decade that he's killed a bunch of women or something. Over the summer I was a nanny for a pretty wealthy family. They were great and super down to earth and the kids were awesome and polite. However, they had a family visit for a few days. The family was from LA and the dad was a Hollywood agent. I don't really care for celebrities, pop culture or brands, but it's all this family would talk about. They had 2 children and the older girl, who was around 6, screamed the following things to me over the few days. Get me conditioner because my hair is important. After throwing a goddamn fit when I told her there was no conditioner for her bathroom because it was in the room where the baby was sleeping. Nanny, get me food, literally snapped her finger above her head. Build me a fort or I'm telling them that you should be fired. After being so incredibly mean to the other children and constantly complaining how bored she was in a house full of toys, art, and swimming pool outside, I shut this crap down so fast and told her to never, ever speak to me or another adult like that. I told her parents and they acted mortified but never doled out consequences or an apology. She put on a full face of makeup every day and wore heels. Not a babysitter, but a paraprofessional at an elementary school. First grade teacher goes around the classroom asking the kids what they want to be when they grow up. One of the boys says, I want to go to prison like my dad. My lungs just stopped working on mayo. When I was around 12 I'd babysit this family with 4 kids, usually for around 9 hours at a time. The older 2 were manipulative buttholes who would convince the younger 2, twins, to do what they wanted knowing that the twins would be the only ones punished. I caught on pretty fast, partially because I got the chance to babysit the twins alone and they were angels. The oldest especially scared the heck out of me. She was a monster. I'd regularly call my mom crying and begging for help because she stopped bothering to try to seem like a good kid after I started punishing all 4 of them when the older 2 got the twins into trouble. And she knew I saw through her. She was regularly on the front of the town paper for doing nice things and went to church etc. So everybody who didn't know her well loved her. She is a teenager now and is still a manipulative person who tries to ruin people's lives if she doesn't get her way. Another kid I worry about is a total sweetheart, but he seems to have a very addictive personality and is incredibly competitive. His gaming time has to be very carefully regulated or it will completely take over his life and he'll start getting anger issues. He can't stand losing games to the point where he kicked the board over and stormed off crying when we played snakes and ladders because I landed on a ladder, despite still only being half as far along the board as him. The middle brother of 3 boys I sat for when I was 15 had then undiagnosed mental problems, and while I was in the kitchen fixing snacks he took a belt out of the laundry basket I had been folding and started beating his little brother's bare back and chest while the older one tried to pull him off. I came in and found the older one holding the middle one in an improvised chokehold while the middle one lashed him with a belt over his legs. I grabbed the little one and hit him in the master bedroom and ran back. Slapped the middle one as hard as I could across the face and got the older one and myself locked in the master bedroom with the phone. The middle one was still amped up and grabbed a knife out of the kitchen and started stabbing the bedroom door. This was a dinky little trailer with those really simple wood doors that are hollow inside. He made a decent hole in the door. Our mothers were in the movies and didn't see my 12 calls and frantic texts. Eventually he calmed down, but I kept him away from the other boys and never babysat for them again. Middle boy was finally diagnosed and now lives in a facility. He is whatever the middle child's name is. I work at a preschool. We had a kid whose mom was convicted of raping and sodomizing 2 kids. The kid's dad was abusive and abandoned him to social services, so they put him back with his rapist mother and she now has custody of him. I worry about him frequently. Honestly, parents who don't care about the kid's education, for whatever reason. Probably, the parent didn't graduate high school in the first place and doesn't place a whole lot of value in education. Many of those kids, source, former teacher, end up working at McDonald's or struggling to find some other work. They don't even get into trades because you have to go to some kind of school for those, and school just isn't something they can do. This happened with my stepdaughter, who is an absolutely wonderful person, but her mom never cared how she did in school or even if she went. Hence her trying to make a living now at 25 by working in daycares, which does not pay very well. She wants to do other things but they'd all require school and she just says I hate school. I work as a TA and there's a little 4-year-old boy in my class who keeps masturbating. You heard me, masturbating, and his mom didn't seem to care. At first, he's just rarely touching his pants, so I thought he must have the need to use the bathroom or has an itch, but then it gradually appears more frequent, to the point he did it during class in front of everyone for the whole lesson. I spoke him out on why he shouldn't do it, told him to sit nicely and took away his toy. He always brings 1 or 2 when he comes to school. What I received was I can do whatever I want. Give me back my toy or my mom gonna yell at you and make you fired. I talked with co-teachers and they were also concerned, so we spoke with his mom at the wanking issue. And guess what? I believe IT is just things kids do for fun and IT will soon be gone. They're easily to forget things, you know. IT's okay. I was tough on him since then, so whenever he's at doing it, he will check if I'm watching. Besides that, he's a mama boy. With all of that, he's basically FK'd up. It is pretty normal for young kids to do that, but the parents need to teach them boundaries, what's appropriate to do in public versus privately. I was a tutor to 4 kids. Their dad was a tiger parent X100. After I left, he was a dong by not paying me my last check and I couldn't handle all his rules. All of them had depression. 2 tried suicide and 1 succeeded. He was only in 1st grade. They all tried running away until he got COVID and died. CPS was crappy. Not a babysitter, but I think my cousin might be a good example in this situation. He moves around so much that he literally lives in a boat. He has done virtual schooling his entire life, so his only friends are his cousins, and his mother is both a COVID denier and an anti-vaxxer. I feel bad for the poor kid. Probably not fricked up, but when I taught skiing we taught lesson that met every week and here was this one girl, maybe 10, who absolutely hated boys and every snack time she would go around and try punching all the boys. In this instance it was when I was a preschool teacher but still applies. A boy joins the school, age 3 years, with his almost 5-year-old brother. 3-year-old boy, let's call him Billy, has been enrolled and expelled from 3 other preschools in a year. Billy beats other kids and teachers, not hits, beats them. I saw him grab a girl by the hair and start punching her repeatedly in the face because she wouldn't share her toy. Here's the rub though. Billy obviously has issues, but the brother is making such a fuss to parents and other adults. Billy is never without being corrected. Billy once threw a ball to his brother and it hit the brother in the face by accident. The older brother said nothing until he realizes I saw it happen. The brother immediately falls to his knees and fake cries about Billy hurting him again just like always. The parents inform us that at home the brothers are not allowed near each other, and since Billy is a handful, they put Billy in his area of the house and that is where he eats and plays separate from mom, dad, and brother. So Billy is absolutely fricked when he grows up. He already has some underlying issues but he will never get the chance to work through them because he's locked in his room away from his family and has no one who loves him. Even though he punched me in the face, I feel sorry for him. Babysat my younger brother. My mom and stepdad don't give a frick. My mom does, she'll help him with homework and stuff, make sure his school is good, but other than that if you want to eat chips and play video games all day, go ahead. Stepdad is deadbeat who smokes and drinks when he's not working. He doesn't really have any morals and now that I don't live there I can't help him as much. A local gymnastics academy. We'd place for parents to spend a lot on kids to take gymnastics classes. Definitely not a place where children develop gymnastics careers. Had an attached preschool that was operated independently by a woman who ran it well. Gymnastics academy owner is an older Eastern European who has two problems. One, for some reason a lot of his coaches are single moms who need daycare to teach. And two, he is obviously banging one of them. So enter his genius plan to open an unlicensed daycare that I operate. Early 20s kid he finds off Craigslist. Mom he is clearly banging is about as sharp as a box of rocks, and routinely drops her two daughters off with no food. The concerning thing about one of these girls particularly is she is somehow rather sharp, but with no real healthy life or outlets. This just means she is crazy manipulative. I mean, we are talking a 7-year-old that is about to be able to totally run circles around her own mother. I can't imagine this girl ended up within any healthy relationships. She was learning that relationships were transactional and about power dynamics by watching her mother, and that she could manipulate anyone in her life to get what she wanted with no concept of long-term consequences. Babysat this kid while I was in high school. He was like 8. I was 17. He got thrown out of mainstream school for flipping a desk on his teacher. I think the biggest this kid is going to be screwed up when he's older was either when he showed me his collection of knives he stole from the kitchen or when he took me to see his dad's pea collection. Yeah, didn't work there too long. I tutor kids. One kid's dad would scream horrible things at him whenever he got a bad grade in school and tell him that he would never amount to anything. The kid was 10 at the time and a little misbehaved, but find me a 10-year-old boy who isn't. I tried to mitigate things, but there's only so much you can do when the parents are your employers. It just broke my heart. When I lived in Canada and worked as a nanny, I used to do casual babysitting on the side for a number of local families. One of them, well, the parents were cool people with basically good hearts, but they should never have been parents. Their youngest son had a video of the original Michael Keaton Jack Nicholson Batman screened at his 4th birthday party, then Army of Darkness at his 5th. The 5th birthday party was attended by the then 4-year-old that I was nanny to, and I had to play dumb and tell my employers that I had no idea why their son was running round the garden with a super soaker shouting "This is my boomstick." The parents were also ex-hippies who hauled their son and his 2 older sisters round in a bus following the Grateful Dead, and they bought their son a "Can You Find Stoned Waldo" t-shirt at one of the shows. When the kid wore this shirt to school before he turned 6, he was made to take it off and turn it inside out before putting it back on, and when asked if he knew why he'd been told to do this, replied, "'Cause there's illegal activity on it, but my dad says it's not illegal if you're sick." Listen, I am completely 420 friendly, and I love my horror movies, but a child that young does not need to be exposed to things like this. I'm not a babysitter, though I've cared for children who aren't mine. If the kid not only knows how to swear at a young age, under 10, but uses the right context. Like there is this one kid in my life who pointed to Charlie Sheen on screen and said that's the W Master. Another, completely unrelated kid will tell you I'm not your N when you ask them to do something. We are talking N-word, harder at the end by someone who wasn't even in preschool. My brother, at 3, would call his teacher the B word. In fairness, she was. But it was literally the only thing he said clearly. We got him a month before he turned 3. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.